This is Scott Allen Miller, and today on SAM IT we're going to talk about how there's only one IT job in the SMB. What is it? It's the generalist. The SMB world is a little bit interesting. When we get into the enterprise, we have ranges of different IT jobs, from database administrator to network engineer to systems specialist to automation engineers and DevOps and help desk and all kinds of things. Lots of areas that we can specialize in, spend our whole time getting really focused on one little thing. And that's fun. When we get into the SMB, things change a lot. The companies that hire us are too small to ever have those kinds of roles. Quite typically, it's hard to have specialties until you have maybe a staff of 50 or 100 people. Of course, as you approach those, you might get some specialties, but a lot still can't specialize. It simply takes a lot of people. It requires each specialty to really have its own department. In the SMB, we don't have anything like that. We have one or just a handful of people who need to cover all those bases. SMBs still have databases, still have networks, still have security. They have systems and desktops and end users who all need support. They might need business analytics. They might need all kinds of things. And we have a total of one or maybe a couple people who have to cover those bases. Those people cannot specialize. It simply can't happen. And that means that in the SMB, everyone does the same job. Of course, our day-to-days, they vary. Possibly a lot, but they don't vary as much as people think. For the most part, SMBs all do the same thing. They might use different technologies. They still need to share files. They still need to run some applications. They still need some virtualization and storage. They have end users who need support. The day-to-day for most SMBs, while different from each other a little, is nothing like IT in the enterprise. It's simply a general thing. One of the challenges we have in the SMB is that no one knows what to call this position. Technically, they're an IT generalist or an SMB IT generalist, but these titles sound awful. Nobody likes them. They don't sound like they have any authority. They don't mean anything, and people don't really like generalist. I'm not sure why, because it's a great thing, right? You do everything. That sounds impressive, but when you say specialist, it sounds better. But when you describe specialist, no one wants to do it. People in the SMB have a tendency to say things like, well, how boring. I don't want to just manage Microsoft SQL Server all day. I want to do this huge range of things. Generalist, when we describe it, is generally the more attractive job, or at least the majority of people I talk to seem to think so. And yet no one wants the title. This is weird, I think, but people are emotional and titles matter. Traditionally, maybe 20 years ago, we had the title of LAN administrator, and this was used for IT generalists because a LAN administrator only existed on small LANs that were small enough to have one person who ran everything that was connected to the LAN, making them an IT generalist in the SMB. This title has fallen away, unfortunately, so today we don't have anything. What you'll find is people using terms like IT manager, systems administrator, director of IT, coordinator, and all kinds of things that are generally meaningful and mean something different. This is problematic, and we'll have different videos talking about titles and the problems there. Here, we just want to point out that no matter what title someone has given you in the SMB, there's only a few possible positions. There are in very rare, generally large SMBs, you will find people who only do help desk. This reasonably happens about 1 to 5% of the time. In larger ones, you may also find IT managers, people who actually manage other IT staff, normally only 2 or 3 people at most. These are real managers, often they're hands-on, so they're only a part-time manager and a part-time IT practitioner. It varies, and it's rare. Beyond that, almost exclusively, no matter what title you find, and often those titles are also used more often than not to simply mean IT generalist. Within the SMB space, titles mean nothing at all. It's more important the size of the company, or the tasks that you did, or the challenges that you overcame, projects that you saw through to completion, things like that. But it's very important to understand, no matter what kind of company you're looking at, if you have fewer than at least a few score of IT workers, everyone or nearly everyone has to be a generalist. Of course, there are some very specific cases where SMBs will contract or hire one specialist for something very unique to them. Once in a while, you will find a company that has really extreme database needs, and they have one specialized database person, and everyone else is an SMB generalist. It does happen. It's very rare. The one way that we can overcome this or get around it or have an exclusion from this rule is that MSPs who service the SMB themselves may have specialists. This is a little bit different. We'll talk about that as well in another video. But just because they service the SMB does not make them generalists. It's if you work in the SMB directly, it means there's really no opportunity not to be a specialist. So nothing wrong with that. Specialist is one thing and generalist is simply a different approach to the field. Both have their benefits, both have their negatives, both can be very rewarding and very special, and in no way ever should someone take being an IT generalist as a negative. In fact, IT generalist is the only type of worker that eventually reaches the top ranks. A CIO is a generalist position. Specialists can get there, but generally only by crossing from one specialty into another to basically become a deep generalist. Generalists, however, have the advantage of kind of throwing that all together all the time, but in either case, getting to the CIO, to that very, very top level position, whether it's in an SMB or in the enterprise, requires generalists. So it's surprising that people tend to have this negative reaction to generalist, but a positive reaction to CIO when it's simply the top level generalist field. What we do find is that generalists have a tendency to go lower in the pay ranges while going higher, and specialists tend to start a little bit higher and cap off. So the bell curve, while the median tends to be similar, the dynamic range of the generalist tends to be a little bit broader, so they get paid a little bit less or a little bit more. Specialists tend to clump a little bit more towards the median. That's about the big difference there. One is not senior to the other. That's not how it works. Their medians are roughly the same. Thanks for joining me. Remember to like and subscribe. Comment below about how you like being a generalist, don't like it, wish you could switch to specialty, why generalists and specialists may create barriers for people moving between different sizes of organizations, or how it may challenge you with moving to get information on your resume or present it in an interview when you don't have a title that really conveys what you do or what you want to do. And I'm going to be providing a link to Patreon if you want to sponsor this show. Feel free to follow that. We'd love to get some of that sponsorship. Thanks for joining me.